The Green Bay Packers confuse me. More accurately, I should say the media that surrounds the team honestly kind of confuses me a lot more. And when I say that, I don't just mean kind of reporters that work for some of the few remaining sports publications out there. No, I mean everything and almost everyone in that whole Green Bay Packers media apparatus, YouTubers, podcasters, all that stuff confuses me. I'm a lifelong Packers fan. I've been a Packers fan my entire life. And I used to really enjoy all of these like cool websites and media personalities that really just covered the team, right? I think it was really unique to the Packers at first. I think now kind of you see almost every fan base kind of has a lot of these things, but I felt like the Packers fans were some of the first to really take advantage of that. Until really one day I kind of didn't really enjoy it as much. It took a really long time. It took, I think, a number of years for me to kind of reach this point. But I think when you start seeing the constant cycle of always needing a scapegoat, the cycle of appreciating players while they're on the team and then trashing them on their way out, trashing them when they reach their contract year, belittling them, saying, oh, they're actually not that good anyways. We don't need them anyways. And I think every fan base does this. But another thing I've seen is really unique, I think, is the constant defense of the front office from a lot of these figures. This is a front office that is so bad that a lot of fans actually are glad that they traded those 2 first-round picks. Not just because you picked up Micah Parsons, but because most people knew, again, this gets back to the weird thing of my confusion of defending the front office, but also being like, I'm glad they don't have 2 first-round picks because they were going to waste them anyways on players that weren't going to be all that good. That's just weird to me. It's a weird thing. I don't get it. The Micah Parsons trade might work out. I really do think that's a trade that, in my opinion, the only way that really works out is if you win a Super Bowl. That is we're going for the Super Bowl type of move. You have to cash in and win a Super Bowl with Micah. Because if you don't, I don't want to say it's a complete failure, but it does kind of feel that way if you don't, right? These cycles they've just gotten really old to me, I think, right? And again, I mentioned these websites, these personalities. I think Cheesehead TV's Aaron Nagler. This is a guy who constantly defends GM Brian Gutekunst. To multiple radio and old guard beat writers have spent this entire year blaming everything that goes wrong. Every issue, hey, we didn't pick up a first down here. Oh, we didn't get this here. We didn't do this here. Oh, no, that's on Matt LaFleur. The Packers need to fire Matt LaFleur, which I don't get. I actually had a whole thing written out. I was going to do a video on Matt LaFleur because it felt like the momentum was kind of going to him not being brought back, but he has been brought back. I think Matt LaFleur is a very good head coach. I think he's done a phenomenal job with this team. And I think that media noise, it's easy to say ignore it. It's easy to say don't follow those pages, don't follow those accounts, don't read those websites. And here's the thing, I don't follow these pages. I don't listen to these podcasts or watch any of their YouTube pages really anymore, or follow their TikToks. It's just the nature of the algorithm on today's social media. It's kind of hard to ignore this stuff. It's kind of hard to not see it. The algorithm sees that I'm a sports fan who likes following and seeing media personalities who talk about football. And then it puts together that I'm a Packers fan. So naturally, it just kind of feeds this stuff to me. I can say, hey, I don't want to see it, and it'll do that for a little bit, but then eventually it'll remember I'm a Packers fan because I post about it on my Twitter or whatever, and it'll start showing it to me again. Without me ever hitting the follow button, it'll start showing me this stuff. And what I see is really the online portion of Packers Nation, of the Packers fandom, that has basically been gaslit every season, I think, about the quality of the team, about the standing of the team, about the standing of the front office, and just everything that goes with it. I just think there's a lot of bull that's been pushed and a lot of bull that's been kind of shoved down Packers fans' throat. And I think a lot of it has been driven by these websites, driven by these personalities, and a lot of the stuff I just find very annoying. And the reason why I really started writing all of this out is because of the new thing that I've seen is that a lot of these personalities, podcasters, radio hosts, beat writers, YouTubers, whatever, have been exclaiming from the top of their lungs that the special team failures should cost Rich Bisaccia his job. And I agree, these failures on special teams are annoying. The failures on special teams are pitiful, right? This team can't find a decent return man. It can't find any decent gunners. Whenever they don't need to give up a big punt return, they give up a big punt or kick return. Things like that. The blunders on special teams, false starts, blocked kicks, all this stuff. It's very annoying. But these are the type of things that we've seen as Packer fans for about a decade plus. These are things that go back to when Sean Menenga was the special teams coordinator. It goes back to when Maurice Drayton was the special teams coordinator. It goes back to Ron Zook when he was the special teams coordinator. It goes back to Sean Slocum when he was the special teams coordinator. Now Rich Bisaccia. Sorry if I didn't pronounce all of those names right. These issues, like I said, they go back more than a decade. And all of these coaches I've mentioned have been ripped, torn to shreds, blamed, fired, ran out of town, castigated, and just, like I said, blamed for all of these failures. And before, people liked Rich Bisaccia, right? He gave kind of a new energy to special teams, things like that. But we've seen those same failures that those coaches dealt with now kind of follow with Rich Bisaccia. And now Rich Bisaccia has now found himself in the crosshairs of these same fans. But if you, being the Packers, have had these issues, blunders, failures, just flat out, awful plays in key moments, in big games, and you have changed and swapped out coordinators every couple years, maybe it's not the coordinators. Maybe it's not the X's and O's that are being taught throughout the week in the practices that's causing these issues. Maybe it's, the Jimmies and Joes. Maybe the Packers should actually focus on filling the back end of this roster with actual special teamers and actually get Rich Bisaccia some guys that he can run his special teams with. Maybe when you're making those end of roster cuts or looking to pick up undrafted free agents, maybe bring in the special teams coordinator and say, hey, what do you think? These kind of street free agents or just free agents in general, guys, special team guys, they rotate around the league. They get cut all the time. Maybe go talk to Rich Bisaccia and try to get some of those guys in. Maybe actually get real punt and kick returners instead of having to use Romeo Doubs and Josh Jacobs in a wild card playoff game where you're trying to stay ahead and you can't afford any mistakes. And then you have your running back who is having knee issues back there returning kicks and he almost fumbles. That's what you can't have, and that's what the Packers did have in the wild card this weekend this past 2 weeks ago. That's what they had. That's what they dealt with. Now, let's talk about kicking. Let's talk about Brandon McManus, who missed multiple clutch kicks in big moments throughout the season. He also made a few as well. But throughout the season, especially versus the Bears in that wildcard game, he missed a lot of key kicks. Lucas Harvasek filled in for McManus midseason. He showed himself pretty well. Some felt he kicked a little bit better than McManus. I thought it was kind of a push, honestly. But, there have been some issues with McManus as of late. He had a great first season here, or at least half season here. Did very well. Felt like, hey, we finally got this kicker thing figured out. And then it's kind of regressed into really inconsistent at times. Sometimes he's on, sometimes he's off. He's been injured a bit this past year, struggled. And now when I say this, McManus kept the job over Harvasek. Now, I don't know if that's a coaching staff decision or a front office call on the kicker. I just know McManus has a multi-year deal. And maybe the front office doesn't want to have egg on their face for cutting him and bringing in a different guy. I don't know. Harvasek is still on the roster. My guess is there will be a kicking competition between McManus and Harvasek. They might bring in another kicker. And, whoever wins that out, wins that out. But I don't know who made the call this season, on who to go with. McManus has been a very good kicker for a lot of his career. That might, maybe they just felt like they didn't want to make that sort of decision late in the season. And McManus, again, it's not like he was awful. It was just inconsistent at times. It just feels like he would, just shank kicks at the wrong time. And, I don't know if that's something you can fully put on Matt LaFleur. I don't know if that's something you can fully put on Rich Bisaccia. I don't know if that's something I could even put on the GM. It might just be one of those tough breaks in football, and a lot of times that's the way it goes in this league. It's just a tough break. It just didn't work out for you. But that doesn't change the fact that I can look at this special teams unit as a whole over the past 10 years and not decide that, something needs to change. And it might not be coaches because I just mentioned multiple former special teams coordinators, a bunch of them over the past decade. And yet the Packers special teams have ranked in the bottom, 5 of the league, of the entire league, all 32 teams, 8 times. They've been in that bottom 5 8 times over the past 10 years. The best year, they were ranked 16th. That's just probably a year where you got lucky a few times. The special teams debacles aren't because of coaching, it's because of the players you have. The Packers don't value true special teamers on the roster. They just don't. They don't value having actual kickoff specialists. They don't value having gunners. They don't value the special teams positions. They just don't. On the end of roster, the Packers would rather use those last few roster spots for developmental players who could eventually be every down players, potentially. More often than not, they don't end up being that, but that's just something that Green Bay's always done, really since the Ron Wolf era, and then which led into like the Ted Thompson era. I believe there's, Mike Sherman was the coach GM for a little bit in between there, but that's something that the Packers do. They just don't care about having special teamers on the roster. And when you don't care about having, core special teams players on the roster, how the hell can you expect your special teams to be any better? And when you don't have core special teamers on the roster, how are you going to blame not just Rich Bisaccia, but even blame Matt LaFleur for not firing Rich Bisaccia? That stuff, not the kicking, but that other stuff, the blown coverages, the inability to really get a return game going, that's not on Rich Bisaccia. That's not on Matt LaFleur. That's on the GM. That's on Brian Gutekunst. And like I mentioned before, with a lot of those personalities, Brian Gutekunst always seems to skate by without any sort of criticism when it comes to these things. He's never mentioned it's either on the floor or it's on the special teams coach. Like I said, we run every special teams coach out of town. I remember Ron Zook was a guy people wanted gone for years. And the special teams didn't get any better when Ron Zook left. So, again, I don't think the special teams will get any better if Rich Bisaccia ups and leaves or gets fired. Brian Gutekunst should probably be getting the most heat for these failures, because like I said, these are roster construction failures. These are things he needs to fix. You might have to go, you might not be able to keep all those, let's be frank, glorified practice squad guys on the roster full time, because honestly, it might be better to have a return man. It might be better to have some gunners out there. Brian Gutekunst has been the Packers GM longer than Matt LaFleur has been the head coach, by a full year officially. I say officially because I have some questions about whether or not former GM Ted Thompson's mental state in his final years were actually that adequate for him to be on the job. I'm not suggesting there was some weekend at Bernie's shenanigans going on. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I wouldn't rule that out. And again, that's my real issue here. Rich Bisaccia gets to be scapegoated. Matt LaFleur gets to be scapegoated. Players get to be scapegoated in Green Bay. But not the GM. Not the front office. Not the front office that has very little turnover. Now, the new Dolphins GM, he came from the Packers. I was a little shocked to hear about someone from the Packers honestly leaving and getting a GM job. Because it just doesn't happen that often in Green Bay anymore. Before it happened all the time, but now the past 10 years, 10, 15 years or so, it just doesn't. A lot of guys just stay there in Green Bay forever. It's a very weird situation. It's very odd to me that you don't see a lot of, movement out of that front office. Usually when it does happen, though, usually it works out. But I think I come back to the front office, I think, doesn't get the heat it should get. That it should. I think the players and coaches, again, they get scapegoated a little bit more than they should. And despite all of this, despite all the bitching, finger pointing, it's another year. It's another painful playoff loss for the Packers. And I feel a little insane because it feels like I have to watch the team media, the media apparatus that I mentioned, that should be taking the front office to task for not having special teams players, for not having the cornerback room adequately equipped to go compete for a Super Bowl. I have to see them waste their time bitching and moaning and complaining about the special teams coordinator again. Instead of taking the front office to task for putting together another top-heavy roster that can't withstand an injury here or there, injuries happen in the NFL. It's the way of the league goes. Instead of putting together a roster that can withstand a few injuries, you put together an extremely top-heavy roster that ended up losing 4 games in a row to close out the season, went 9-7-1, and is likely, I don't know what this team's going to be next year, right? I guess we'll talk about this. I don't know where the Packers go next year, because a lot of it is reliant on players just coming back like that. I tried to snap my fingers, but I don't know if you can pick it up. Just coming back and picking up right where they left off. And they might come back and pick up right where they left off. But you can never be sure about that. Yes, we've cut down ACL recovery times, so you hope that Tucker Kraft and Micah Parsons come back, hit the ground running. But there's always a chance they won't. You can hope that Devontae Wyatt comes back how he was, because once Devontae Wyatt left, that defensive line was terrible. That's another position group that I mentioned, like cornerback, the GM Brian Gutekunst left bare. That left top heavy, that left Devontae Wyatt, and then you hope the bunch of guys around him can play well. Well, Devontae Wyatt got hurt, and eventually teams just started running all over this defense. It's a concern to me that the GM of this team can have so many deficient parts of the roster on defense, on offense, and special teams, and yet somehow it's Matt LaFleur's and Rich Bisaccia's fault and not his. That's just weird to me with how GMs operate in this league. I mean, we've had 9 head coaches fired this cycle, only 2 GMs. Only 2 GMs. GMs in football maybe have the best job security in the entire league. And it makes no sense. Coaches can get fired after a year or 2. GMs, they get to pick 2 to 3 coaches under their tenure before there's even talk of firing them. It's just weird to me how the scapegoating goes in the NFL. By fans, by media, it's just strange to me. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know what you think down below in the comment section. I'm going to try to do more of these. I'm not sure how often I'll upload on this channel, but just when anything gets in my craw, I'll type something out and then read it back to you guys here. But if you enjoyed this video, let me know. Leave a like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Peace.